What are the signs that the relationship isn't worth fighting for? I'll tell you the biggest sign. And I learned this when I watched this man who's a divorce attorney talks about his cases and what he thinks about marriage, what he thinks has the chance of working out versus like what didn't work out. And he asked the woman, because he was representing her, and said, what was the moment that you realized that the relationship was done? She said that he every morning would always make sure that her granola was refilled, not even have to ask, and just always refill it for her, right? He'd write these little post-its too for her when he was leaving. Even after all these fighting, he'd still do it. The day she knew that the relationship was over was when he stopped filling the granola, stopped doing the letters, because he stopped caring. The moment you realize the relationship isn't worth fighting for is when you realize that that person just doesn't care. You're just tired, you give up. It's the giving up part. She realized in that moment that he just didn't have anything left in him to keep the relationship going.
The irony is, her husband obviously got pushed to a point where he did not want to fill the granola any longer, and he did not want to write those post-it notes. So the question we need to ask ourselves is, what did she do to push him to the point where he stopped doing it? He used to do it, even after they argued. So it sounds like to me, the husband got fed up with her over something, and she did not want to take any accountability for her behaviours, which led to the collapse of the marriage. So what did she do instead? She filed for divorce.
She was a bitter woman.
When I left my husband after a 22-year marriage and being with him for 25 years, the first phone call I made the next day was call my psychologist. And I remember I said to her, I said, Naomi, one of the things that I want to work on is what was my part in this breakup, and more importantly, what can I do to fix myself, because I don't want to attract the same kind of man. I mean, after all, second marriages, the divorce rate is at 75%. So the reason that occurs is because people, when they get a divorce, they don't change. They think the problem is him, and therefore they end up attracting the same kind of person. They may look different, they may act different, they may be different, but inside they're the same. And that's why the second divorce rate is 75% higher. And I made sure that that wasn't going to be me in that statistic. So know thyself.
If she knew there was something wrong with her that played a part in the breakdown of her marriage, she should have fixed herself while she was in her marriage, not afterwards. I wouldn't be surprised if she blamed her husband as an excuse to divorce him.
I wouldn't be surprised.
So I was speaking with a girlfriend the other day about divorce, and she was asking me, when was one of the first signs that I knew something was wrong with my marriage? And I have this memory so heavily imprinted on my brain, I can still feel it to this day, and it sounds so weird. It was the middle of the night, we were both asleep, and in the middle of the night, my ex, while he was asleep, grabbed me from behind for a spoon hug in bed. It was like one of those really good big bear hugs in bed. And that sent me like electricity through my body. I have never in that marriage experienced such joy than when he hugged me in that moment. And he was asleep and he wasn't doing it intentionally. And that joy and elation carried me through the week. I was walking on cloud 9 because of that hug. And I kept thinking about it, and I started thinking, like, in hindsight, obviously, why am I so excited about a simple hug when he was unconscious? That's how little I had the affection that I needed. And it kind of clicked. I was like, that tiny little absolute nothing moment ended up being the best thing in my marriage that week. And that incident is what made me start kind of taking inventory of my relationship and taking a really hard look at it and realizing all the holes that were in my marriage. Okay, calm down. I did not divorce him because of the hug. It was years after that we ended up getting divorced. But it was just one of those things that kind of started getting my brain thinking. We all kind of have those domino moments, don't we? Where something happens that makes us start thinking about all of these other things that we need to be thinking about. Like you've woken up and you can now actually see your relationship for what it is. Anyways, it's such a random moment, but I've never forgotten that feeling. And it's different for everyone. Everyone has one of those first aha moments, and it's usually something really small.
At first I thought to myself that if a simple hug could make her feel so amazing, perhaps she really loves him and adores him. Maybe it's real love she's feeling, and she could find more ways to experience that closeness and affection to make their marriage stronger. But instead, she took that as a sign to figure out what is missing in her life to find reasons to divorce him.
What a piece of shit.
Want to know what nobody tells you about divorce? Is that once you get married and then you procreate and then you get divorced, that human will be in your life forever because you procreated with them. And then you get married again, and now that human will be in your new spouse's life forever because you procreated with them. No one tells you about that. I'm telling you now.
This is the reason why marriage is designed to be a lifelong commitment, so these confusing scenarios don't take place. Either way, I'm sure most people acknowledge this is how things will be after a divorce, but for some weird reason, she did not realise this.
She's an idiot.
When does the grieving process stop after divorce? Well, let's talk about that for a minute. Now, I'm a believer that grief is a human experience and that we can't ever control when it starts, when it stops, and if it ever really goes away. It's just part of life. And I even have moments, even though I'm so freaking glad that I got divorced, like I have not regretted it one day in my life. The only thing I regretted was not leaving sooner. And you know what? If you got left, different side of the coin, but same thing, the grief. It still hits me from time to time. And it's not like I get overly sad. It's just kind of like a ping that hits my heart. And I just kind of feel like, oh, you know, like there's a weight to it. Or like I'll feel like guilty for something that my kids are experiencing and I can't fix it. And I'm like, it's because of the divorce. Like I just blame myself sometimes. And it happens still 7 years later. And the reason I'm telling you this is because, listen, grief is grief. Starting over is starting over. Loss is loss. And you can't decide when that shuts off because you hit certain times where you're just like, this sucks. Or you see your kids struggling, or you're reminded of something with your ex, or I don't fucking know. It's just life, right? So the goal isn't really to like make the grief go away. The goal is to like navigate it and walk in it and recognize like, hey, grief, I see you. And then put it away, you know?
If she doesn't regret it, why is she grieving over it? Probably because she knows deep down she made a horrible mistake or did something wrong. She's trying her best to justify her decision to get divorced, but she lives with the constant reminder of guilt about how her children were affected by her decision. She acknowledged that she still feels the grief after 7 years. This doesn't sound like somebody who is happy to get divorced as she claims to be.
Poor, deluded females.
No one tells you when you get divorced that you're going to feel like you're grieving a death. And not just like a death of a person, but the death of shared dreams and a shared future and a house and a car and a boat. Like all these things you're getting ready to potentially lose, they're gone. And that feeling of loss can be overwhelming and take a while to get over and process. And it can hit you at the craziest time. So if you're feeling like you are grieving a death after your divorce, you're normal. You gotta feel your way through it, experience all the emotions, but know that there is a brighter future ahead and a new path for you to walk. So after you've taken adequate time to heal, which is different for everyone, it's important not to get stuck and start taking steps forward. Talking to someone like a divorce coach like me or a therapist can help you get back on your path.
If deciding to get divorced causes her grief and loss, I would say that she shouldn't get divorced in the first place. If somebody gets divorced, it should be liberating at best. But if it isn't, it's more than likely these women are grieving over something they know deep down they still want to hold on to, something they still want to fight for. And getting divorced was not the best option.
You poor, deluded fools!
Thank you for your support, guys. Remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and check out the Goal Driven Male book on Amazon. Until next time,